Welcome to Card Central 365 on STL Sports Central. I'm Stefan Caray. He's Mike Claiborne. It was a fun weekend of games for the St. Louis Cardinals, taking 2 out of 3 from the Dodgers. Before we get into that, all content here on STL Sports Central is provided by DraftKings. The crown is yours. This show powered by Gray Bar. Claibs, take 2 out of 3 from the Dodgers. You got to be feeling pretty good about yourself.
Oh, yeah, you definitely have to feel good. Realistically, yesterday they had a chance to win. Kershaw was Kershaw, even at this stage of his career. But, you had a chance to get in the bullpen. You just couldn't push the runs across when you needed to. But overall, I thought it was a good weekend for the Cardinals, especially because they didn't beat themselves. Sometimes you can be enamored with the light show that comes with the Dodgers, but that didn't faze them. They played good sound baseball. And as I said yesterday, they had a chance to win that game. It just got out of hand on the back end. And, you'll settle for 2 out of 3 anytime.
I want to focus on a couple of things. You mentioned not getting themselves into situations where things could blow up in your face. The Cardinals pitchers were walking the tightrope like they were the fabulous Walendas. I mean, they had a way to really make sure that every time there were runners in scoring position, they kept them in check. I think that was a big recipe for the success of St. Louis this weekend.
Yeah, especially with Fetty. He had a lot of traffic on the bases, but, nobody scored on him. And that's something that you have to appreciate. And, pitching, man, comes in different flavors. You have a guy like Sonny Gray who mixed strikeouts with soft contact. And then you had Fetty who relied on his defense to get him out of some jams. So, you take what you can take. You appreciate it because at the end of the day, as long as you get the W, it really doesn't make a difference on how you get it done.
Spent some time with Ollie Marmol after the first win, the 4-0 shutout that Sonny Gray pitched, and he was fired up. This is the type of win for St. Louis, series win, that is, that I think helps put them on the map a little bit more than they had already been. I think teams will start to recognize, hey, the Cardinals are for real. But you do have some questions. Jordan Walker's still not in the lineup. You have some pieces that need to fit in that maybe aren't quite fitting yet. How have you felt about the way that the lineups have been constructed over the last week?
Well, yeah, considering you don't have the resources that you would like, you're basically playing a game with 24 outs, okay? Because you're not getting any productivity out of right field. Yesterday Burleson played it, but, leading up to and including the fact that when Walker's not playing and he was starting to play better, you didn't get anything out of right field the whole week. And you still found a way to win some games. So if you can just address that issue, and I don't think the answer is in the minor leagues, okay? You have to wait until Walker is able to play because we've seen what you have in the minors, and you don't have anything. You don't have anything that can really make a legitimate contribution. Now, you could say, well, you could bring JC up, put him in second, and then put Donovan in the outfield. But then you're weakening yourself at 2 positions. So you just got to hold on and hope that you can get some productivity out of some other people compared to not getting anything out of right field.
I think that's a really good point. And the Cardinals offense has struggled a little bit with Jordan Walker being out of the lineup. A few days ago, I checked, they were hitting barely above 200 without Walker in the lineup. And he provides a little bit of thump in that bottom part of the order. Now, Nolan Gorman has played better. Alec Burleson has been consistent. So at least you're getting something out of those guys. But 7, 8, 9 with Scott struggling, that's an area where pitchers can really hide.
Oh, there's no doubt about it. You hit the nail on the head. You got to find a way to get Scott going again. I don't know whether you move him in the lineup or not. And one of the problems is this. Because of who's hitting in front of him, he doesn't have a chance to utilize his speed with regard to getting on base and stealing a base. And all of a sudden, he's at third base. You don't have that option. And him trying to bunt more, which I think he should. I don't think there's any doubt about that. I just think you got to find a way for him to be more focused. Maybe you hit him, run him a little bit more. But then again, thinking about who's on in front of him, there's a slow runner. So maybe you move him in the lineup and just see what he can do in another spot.
Speaking of lineup movement, a lot of the fans have been asking and talking about Lars Nootbaar and his struggles at the top of the order. He's gone a little bit quiet. Would you consider him moving him off of that spot?
I would. Right now, he's fighting it. And I'm not sure what the best spot is in the order. I mean, I know people are enamored with his on-base percentage, but he's not even getting on base right now. And so is he a 2 guy? Is he a 7 guy? I don't know. He's been kind of locked into that leadoff spot. But right now it's not effective because here's the other thing. With him, even in the leadoff spot, he's not a base stealer. I mean, he can go from first to third on certain plays, but he's not that ideal guy that can really generate a run in the first inning.
I will say, and again, Ollie Marmol has done a really nice job constructing his lineups on the day-to-day. If you see Lars Nootbaar in the 7 spot, it's very different than seeing Pedro Pajes or seeing another player that maybe isn't as offensively gifted. With the thump that you have before him, it might be worth a look. And you certainly have seen a lot from Mason Wynn. His strides, maybe he can fill that leadoff role. Then you bump everybody up a spot. We'll see if they try to change that. But if Nootbaar starts to get on base, I'm sure it won't be a point that matters all that much. But at this point in time, maybe it's time for a change.
Oh, I think that shaking up a lineup is a good thing from time to time. And I think the best example is when you moved Mason Wynn into the 2 spot. And what did that do? Then when you moved Herrera to the 5 spot, behind Contreras and what that did. So, I think it depends on obviously who you can get started. And also who you're facing for the next few weeks. What kind of pitchers are you facing? You're facing ground ball guys. Are you facing fly ball guys? And then, not one staff is going to feature just one particular way they pitch. But I just think from a rejuvenation standpoint, it's a good thing. I mean, dropping Arenado to the 6th spot, he's been better. He's been better than what he was when he was up in the order. Let's just put it that way. He's not where he wants to be or not where we think he should be with productivity. But, it's just a statement. And it's amazing, Stefan, how we get enamored with the discussion of a lineup. Just trying to, it's our way of contributing to the game as far as, discussion about what we see and what we think. And at the end of the day, the manager and staff have way more information than we do on who can do what and when. So, when they do something like that, you kind of say, okay, they put probably a little bit more homework into it than you and me and anybody else. So you ride with it, and because they'll have a reason on why they feel this is a better situation.
I agree. And they've done a good job by and large this year, 7 games above 500. We'll touch on the Toronto Blue Jays here in just a moment. A reminder that Cards Central 365 is powered by Graybar, your distributor for electrical and datacom needs. He's Mike Claiborne. I'm Stefan Caray. But before we get into the Blue Jays, one thing that I just wanted to get your opinion on. Clayton Kershaw, phenomenal start yesterday, but expressed some frustration with the media about the Matt Adams highlight being posted on the scoreboard in right field. Do you think that it was Bush League, or do you feel like
I do. No, I do. I don't get that. And I haven't talked to anybody about it, but how long ago was that?
Okay. 2011, I believe.
All right. So let's move on from that. I didn't appreciate it. And I can see why he didn't either. Because, that's history, man. That's something, what's the motivation? And I guess the thing is, well, the 40,000 who were there, how many actually were there when this took place? And I didn't think it was, I would have done it differently. Let's put it that way.
Well, Mike, you played sports. One concept that all athletes are familiar with is you don't want to give anybody bulletin board material. I think that it had the opposite effect of what was intended on Clayton Kershaw. It did not rattle him in any way whatsoever. In fact, it probably motivated him even more to have his best start of the year. So he pitched great. Credit to Clayton Kershaw on a wonderful career. It might be the last time that he pitches at Busch Stadium, which kind of factors into your point that that's a really tough send-off for one of the game's legends and a player that has over 100 more wins than losses, is close to the 3,000 strikeout mark, probably the greatest pitcher of my generation. Unfortunate to see that end that way.
And you know what? And here's the thing about it, Stefan. We're better than that. I mean, this is a place that players have always appreciated and how we treat the opposition, how we respect what they've done. And there have been some great moments that have happened in Busch Stadium with the other guy. I go back to think about Griffey's 500th home run that took place here. And there are other things that have happened with great players. And we've always shown that respect and appreciation what they meant to the game. And why somebody thought it was a good idea to do that yesterday, I don't know. Again, I haven't spoken to anybody about it, but I know we're better than that. as an organization and as fans.
Well, especially after Tommy Edman received such a warm welcome back. It didn't undo that from the fans, but it certainly was a blemish on what was otherwise a great weekend for the St. Louis Cardinals. Now, let's turn focus to another team in blue, the Toronto Blue Jays, who have been surging a bit. They've been playing a lot better baseball, 4.5 games back of first in the AL East. They trailed the Tampa Bay Rays and the New York Yankees. It's going to be Jose Barrios versus Andre Palante here in game one. Big series for the Cardinals.
Yeah. I mean, right now, when you look at this 9-game stretch, you felt like, hey, we can go 7-2. If we go 7-2, it's a good week. Well, now, you're hoping to go 6-3. And that means you have to sweep Toronto, which is not going to be easy. They're in a very game division right now, and they feature some good players on their ball club. So you're going to have to bear down. And, but the thing is with the Cardinals this year, they have responded to that challenge. They've always found a way to play good teams well. And this will be another good test for them. But and they relish that. It's as we talked about, I think you and I talked about this last week. You have some teams that say, oh my goodness, here comes Toronto, or here comes the Dodgers. And they're like, well, we just hope we can just play good against them. We think it's a good week. The Cardinals are like, no, bring them on, man. If we want to be considered a good team, we have to play the good teams. We respect them, but we're here to beat them. And I think Wilson Contreras kind of alluded to that earlier in the week about, hey, we can play with anybody. And I think that's the approach you have to have, because I know in another sport, I remember the Blues had a guy named Scott Mellenby played, and they were playing Detroit, and he'd just been traded over to St. Louis. And Detroit at that time was a very good organization. They were winning Stanley Cups. They were the cream of the crop. And somebody media-wise asked them about, the Detroit factor and how good they are. And he just stopped. He said, what do you want? You want us to go over there and ask them for their fucking autographs or what? And he was so plain about it. And that's kind of how, the Cardinals approach teams now. They're not enamored with them as a team. They respect them because they've had a good record and they play well. But you can't get caught up into being like in awe of them as a team. You respect them. But hey, you know what? We think we have, 26 guys in this room that can play well too.
Yeah, there's always an element of trying to prove people wrong. And I think that's what this team does, is they find their own motivation to win games. They are an old school team in a new school era of baseball. And I think that was what was on display this past weekend against the Dodgers. The Blue Jays, I think, match up a little bit more with St. Louis in terms of what their team is composed of. They have solid starting pitching. There's no doubt about it. Barrios is very talented, has had a good career against the Cardinals and otherwise in the major leagues. But they have young, sort of unknown hitters. You look at guys like Barger. You look at Dalton Varsho. You obviously will see the Bichettes and the Guerreros and the Springers. But that lineup is composed of some players that probably a lot of the baseball world aren't too familiar with. Same as the Cardinals. If you're not following this team every day, you might not know the legend of Brendan Donovan or Ivan Herrera, but you start watching them, you say, hey, these guys are pretty good. That's how the Blue Jays play baseball.
I agree. Stefan, you hit the nail on the head. They have a couple of names that are on that household conversation as far as recognition is concerned, but they have a lot of guys who just show up and play, and they're forging their way into being a common discussion point as far as good players in the game and good teams. And so they marry each other in a lot of different respects. And I think, though, there's probably a little bit more pressure on them to be able to compete and win in the division or get into postseason play. They're a little bit ahead of the Cardinals with regard to name recognition. But at the end of the day, they check a lot of boxes, as do the Cardinals. And that's why I think this is going to be a very good series matchup-wise.
Well, if you remember, you can wind the clocks back to 2023, the last time the Blue Jays came into town. I believe it was opening weekend against the Cardinals that
You're
the Blue
right.
Jays came into town. Very, very special day for my family. It was my dad's first game broadcasting for the Cardinals. And guess what day it falls on that the Blue Jays come into town in 2025? June 9th. So take a look at that date and wonder why that might be significant for my dad. And we will see.
I have no idea why June 9th has a day of recognition.
You have no idea?
None.
Think about what numbers.
Oh gosh.
It was all over Twitter. So hopefully they can get a win for him on what is being deemed Chips Day. They should have a bobblehead for him on on today for the Cardinals. Maybe we'll see with him and Brad. Maybe they could be like a
now you changed the whole tone and texture of the game for tonight, and that'll be in the back of my mind from this point on.
You're going to start cracking up, which is great. You got to keep it light at this point in the season. But this would be great. It would be the Chip Caray Bowl. Would be a wonderful win for St. Louis, the Redbirds versus the Bluebirds. But a quick reminder that baseball season is officially underway, and it's time to step up to the plate with DraftKings Pick 6. Think of DraftKings Pick 6 as your fastball right down the middle. It's the easiest way to play for cash and take a shot at a big win. Just select 2 or more players and choose if they'll have more or less of a stat. Pick 6 is available in most states, including California, Texas, Georgia, Missouri, and more. Cash in your baseball knowledge. New players get $50 in Pick 6 credits instantly on just a $5 entry. Download the DraftKings Pick 6 app and use code STL Sports. That's code STL Sports for new customers to play $5. Get $50 in Pick 6 credits. Better payouts, bigger wins, only with Pick 6 from DraftKings. The crown is yours.
Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org in Connecticut. Must be 18 and over. Age and eligibility restrictions vary by jurisdiction. Pick 6 not available everywhere, including New York and Ontario. Void where prohibited. 1 per new customer. Bonus awarded as non-withdrawable Pick 6 credits that expire in 14 days. Limited time offer. See terms at pick6.draftkings.com/promos.
Welcome back to Cards Central 365 on STL Sports Central. Mike Claiborne, Stefan Caray previewing the St. Louis Cardinals versus the Toronto Blue Jays, who have been surging a bit. They're 35-30. They're 8-2 in their last 10 games, but have struggled on the road, 13-17, and have not played well against teams above 500. They're 15-21. So the Cardinals have the advantage. They've been really good at home this year. See how they handle the American League East's third best team.
It's going to be a good series. And, when you look at Toronto, as I said earlier, they're feeling a little pressure from a manager standpoint because people expect them to be able to contend. And obviously the Yankees got off to a great start, but they're beatable. They're catchable. And when you look at that division with Boston, Yankees, and Tampa, excuse me, all those teams have just enough of an it factor where they can contend. I think it's the deepest division in baseball right now. And don't let the records fool you. All those teams can throw out some good players. And Toronto's one of those teams. And as you mentioned, the one thing that they have to break through on is winning on the road. And that's something, as we saw with the Cardinals, they struggled with early. Now they've gone on the road and really created a real momentum builder for them. So we'll see what Toronto can throw in here today. They have some good players on that team that I'm looking forward to watching.
And this is a team that doesn't score a whole lot in Toronto. No. Looking at their distribution of scores over the last couple of months, they're right around 4 runs per game, maybe a little bit over that. You have to expect.
Let me ask you a question.
Yes, absolutely.
Is it me, or are we running into a lot of teams that aren't scoring right now? And I don't know whether it's one of those times of the calendar year where teams kind of hit the wall, or as I call it, a taller fence. But, we talked about Kansas City. We talk about Texas. The Dodgers were doing well until they ran into the Cardinals, where they scored 1 run in 2 games. But we're seeing a lot more teams right now that seem like they're having a problem scoring runs. And I don't know whether it's the fact that, as I said, are they hitting the wall, or is the pitching had a rejuvenation where they've pushed the reset and we're seeing pitchers going longer in games. Bullpens are starting to come together, although bullpen help right now seems to be a challenge for everybody. But it just seems like right now the Cardinals are facing a lot of teams that just aren't scoring. And we want to make sure they keep in that mode of not scoring until they get out of here.
Well, certainly that's the right point. But you look back to Texas, you look back to Kansas City. That wasn't
Baltimore was like that too. They were struggling. Yeah,
they could not stop the scoring against Kansas City. The Royals found a way to beat the Cardinals and really put the ball in play. That top of the order was almost more daunting than the Dodgers top of the order, I should say, because every time they were getting up, every time Witt, Pasquantino, Garcia came up, they were getting on base. So you can't let the narrative flip a little bit. I think things have been working in reverse for the Cardinals, where beginning of the year, their starting pitching was dominant. The hitting was very good, but then fell off a little bit. Now the hitting is taking over again, and the starting pitching has struggled, which brings me to a good point. Pallante, big start for him. He needs to have a good outing because it's been a little bit since he has had one.
I agree with you. He's been roughed up a little bit more than normal, and he's a guy who has to be precise. He doesn't have a lot of room for error. He has to make sure that he keeps the ball on the ground. He can't have long innings. He's got to really attack hitters more effectively than what he's done recently. But I agree. I think this is an important start for him from a confidence standpoint, because, as I said, he has to be able to cross every T and dot every I the right way. If not, he gets in trouble, and all of a sudden he has a long inning, and now all of a sudden you got bigger problems down the road. So, especially in this stretch of games, because we don't have any off days for a while, unless the weatherman decides to give us an off day. And fortunately, this next road trip we play in Milwaukee, and then we play in Chicago with the White Sox. Hopefully, better weather will be around where we don't have to deal with that.
That would be excellent. Certainly a good sign, because the Cardinals don't want to play any more doubleheaders. They've already had 5 of them this year, and we all know how you feel about those, Claibs.
I don't mind if they were 7-inning doubleheaders,
like they do in the minors.
Yeah, I thought that was a great move by baseball, and then the commissioner decided he didn't like it, so we went back to 9. And I think 7-inning doubleheaders, you manage differently, you play differently. That one more trip through the order has such an impact, or one less trip through the order. You have to do things with more urgency compared to the 9-inning game.
Well, and in many ways, the strategy of the game is very different than it used to be. And throwing in little wrinkles like that is always fun, not only for the fans, not only for the managers, but for the broadcasters as well. It's just a little different. The pace of play is better. 7-inning games, arguably, at least in my experience doing those doubleheaders, they feel like they go by quicker than the first 7 innings of a normal.
Yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right. It's just a different pace, different approach, and I miss those when we had them.
Well, Barrios 2-2 with a 3.67 ERA. His last outing went 6 innings, gave up just 1 run against the struggling Philadelphia Phillies. He's 3-0 with a 3.16 against the Cardinals in his career. Pallante, we know how he did back on June 3rd. 4 1/3, 7 earned runs off 7 hits, no walks, 2 strikeouts. Just couldn't quite find his stuff against the Kansas City Royals. Has not pitched poorly, but has not pitched particularly well against the Blue Jays. 5.40 ERA in 4 appearances versus Toronto. Claibs, before we get out of here, do you have any final thoughts ahead of this final portion of the homestand?
Well, you know what? It's been one that we've seen some good things. We've seen some things that, kind of make you scratch your head. I think these next 3 games are very important before you go on the road, because you have a huge series against Milwaukee coming up, but obviously you can't think that far ahead. But you need to build some momentum. You need to, sweep. Obviously you want to sweep, but you need to get off on the right foot against Toronto, a team that, you certainly give respect to. And you just need to start doing some things better. And as we talked about it earlier, you got to find some help in right field right now. Other than Burleson, you got nothing out of that position. And hopefully you get that going. You hope to get Victor Scott back on the right track. If you get those 2 guys going, that position and that player in the right direction, man, this could be a fun week for Cardinal baseball.
Next 6 games are huge. You look at the Brewers, who are clipping at the heels of St. Louis, just a game and a half back for second place. Mike Claiborne, thank you so much for joining us on Card Central 365, powered by Gray Bar. This is STL Sports Central. I'm Stefan Caray. All content provided by DraftKings. The crown is yours. 3-game series begins tonight against the Toronto Blue Jays. We will see you another time, another place, hopefully after a Cardinals win.